So today I've got Greg Lee, the lead pastor at Hunter Bible Church in Newcastle, just a bit north of Sydney, 3 hours north of Sydney. And I've got Tim Clemens, the lead pastor at Grace City Church in Sydney, inner city Sydney in Waterloo, and the membership pastor at Grace City, Amy Townsend. It's great to have you all here.
Great to be here.
Can you guys just briefly, for those who don't know you, just tell us real quickly a little bit about your church and a little bit about your role? Greg?
Okay. So as you said, we're just a little bit north of Sydney. Newcastle is a working class city, a lot like Newcastle was in England. There's, in any given week, there's probably just short of 1,000 people involved, somewhere between 900 and 1,000. 3 campuses, 4 congregations.
Tim, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, so we planted Grace City Church 5 years ago. We are in kind of pretty close to the centre of Sydney, a suburb called Waterloo, just 5 kilometres south of the CBD. We have 2 congregations at the moment, 9 a.m. and 11 a.m., just over 200 adults averaging on a Sunday, or at least that was happening before we all went online. And primary demographic would be kind of 20 to 40-year-olds, young professionals working in the city. Quite highly ethnically diverse as well.
Great. And Amy, what's your role?
Yeah, my main role is kind of thinking about membership in the life of church. So not just what it is for our existing church community to be one that reflects biblical community and caring for one another and sharing life together and being actively involved, but also how we as a church have open doors to the outsider and help them connect in whatever capacity is best for them, whether they're exploring Christianity or hoping to call Grace City home.
Great. Now, we want to talk today about how to make the most of online views. It's a question that a lot of people have been sending through to us and wanting to understand and get better. So I'm hoping that we get an honest view from both these churches, and also hopefully we can bring in some conversations that we've been hearing also from around the network. So really, the answer we're trying to get to is how do we actually turn those views into meaningful follow-up? The reality is it was a lot easier pre-COVID to see newcomers, to eyeball them, to welcome them in, to see that they didn't come back or to see them return over the coming weeks. But before we kind of dig into the practical, I want us to think into what are we actually hoping to achieve in this area? So what's the sort of key outcome that we're seeking to achieve? So maybe Tim, can I kick off there? What does a mature person, look like?
Yes, so the mission that Jesus gives us is making mature disciples, make disciples. And so how do you unpack that? There's various different ways that you could do it. At our church, we use the M's, and so we want to see people magnifying God, growing in their love for Him and their passion for His glory. Membership, kind of recognizing that they've been brought into a community of people and seeking to express that through their love and kind of devotion to others. Maturity, people who are deep in the Word and growing more and more into the likeness of Christ. Ministry, people who have been gifted by God and then sacrificially serve others using those gifts. And then mission, people who are on about God's mission to make mature disciples of Jesus. So that's one way of expressing what mature discipleship looks like. Maybe you could say, love God, love others. There's a few different ways to put it, but that I think is the target. That's the goal that we're all striving for in our ministries.
So Greg, when you think about the ideal sort of Hunter Bible Church person, what springs to mind?
Well, yeah, thinking about maturity, it's a biology word, isn't it? We get it from the world around us, that things grow from childishness to adulthood to maturity. And so it's a process word as well. So I think inherent in the idea of maturity is growth toward an endpoint. So the endpoint for us as human beings is Christ. He is the human being. And so it seems like maturity is this process where we grow from sinful childishness to mature Christ likeness. I think Tim nailed it. Probably 2 things to add shade to it. In the New Testament, it seems to me that it's largely a communal thing. We're very individualistic in the way we think, but when you look at passages like Ephesians 4, we all grow up together into the head, which is Christ. Maturity is a communal thing. It's something you measure as a church, not an individual. The second thing, I wonder if it's worth sometimes thinking about how does God mature people? And it strikes me there are four kind of big things that God will use. He uses his word, obviously. He uses his spirit. He uses his people. And he uses the circumstances of life. And all four of those, you don't see them working independently, but all four of those work together. The circumstances of life and people and the word and the spirit are involved in this transformation from childishness to Christ-likeness. I think, especially what does God use, it kind of helps us to think about the COVID-19 situation, because the people bits change, but the word, the spirit, and the circumstances, those are still all very operational, aren't they? And so as we're trying to think through how do we mature people, yes, we have less contact, but we still have the word, the spirit, and we have this unique opportunity of circumstance at the moment where we're seeing people transformed.
So the body, fellowship, to use another, the people of God, the one another in passages that we see all through the New Testament, even the Old Testament, we've got all the biblical theology of the people of God. They're vital in, as you say, key means in seeing people mature and grow up. In this context, community is very difficult. So I guess what have you been doing, Tim and Amy, to have this one anothering aspect?
Yeah, I guess we've put, community groups within the life of our church, or Bible studies, midweek growth groups, what every church has their own name for them. But for us, community groups, we've put a real emphasis on that, particularly for the COVID season. When COVID started, there was still the opportunity for some group, in those early days, community groups were still meeting, and then kind of everything stopped quite suddenly. So community groups were able to go online quickly. And while that did have quite a shift in the way we can interact and chat and just hang out, that's been an adjustment, but I think people are really getting there, even though screen time is tiring. So we're using community groups kind of as that platform to encourage one another, check in on how one another's going, because we don't have that opportunity to rub shoulders with each other on a Sunday anymore, which us as a leadership team, that's probably one of the things we're really missing most in this season, just not thinking, you're just thinking, I haven't seen so-and-so for months, and they see us on screen, so that's quite difficult. We've naturally had care structures kind of amplify since COVID, so more members of a care team, more intentionality in our care, less reactive, more proactive. So, a structure of care phone calls, a freezer full of meals, really just making our care, practical care in the life of church really accessible, including, lots of churches now have better funding for those who need it. And we're really seeing that in lots of churches where people are losing jobs, students can't pay tuition, things like that. So more need to be financially supportive as well. Are just some of the things.
Has this crisis this season been a positive in terms of seeing every member connected? Has it forced you as churches to be more intentional about caring for fringe members, caring for those who are outside community groups, caring for the not yet Christian who's been coming into your gathering?
Yeah, it's certainly heightened the need to go above and beyond what's normal. So I think any church can get stuck in, well, this is the way we do things, and if someone doesn't fit into that way, it's easy to just let them slip through the cracks. And so when all of your normals get radically shaken up, it gets you being quite creative and quite inventive, and just part of my role, for example, has been looking at everybody in our fringe and going, okay, what do we need to do to get them connected now? And I'm sure soon we'll talk about integration and things like that. The members of our community, of our church, who are not in community groups, who've just been stalled for ages, is online an easier place for them. So how can we engage some of those people in the life of church who have been less engaged? I think it's put a good challenge on all of us.
Greg, what does success look like for you in this sort of membership area, and how have you had to, as a team, change your metrics, so to speak.
Yeah, we tend to think in terms of membership as a front door, people joining us, and our living room, people living with us. I'm guessing you're asking mainly about the living room at the moment, aren't you? About people living in church with us. I feel like success in this context is their commitment to the body. So when people join a church, they're often thinking about, what do I want from the church? And we're really working hard to get them to see that they're joining a family and they're joining a body. COVID has given us this brilliant opportunity to show people it's a really serious and important thing to join a body. And so we've talked a lot about loving the family together, the same sort of stuff Amy was talking about. It sounds to me like these guys have hit a real benchmark there. They're doing a brilliant job of what most of us would say, oh, we'd love to be doing that. I guess what all of that is about is helping people to see that we're part of a family and to commit intentionally to it. Sounds like what Grace City has done a brilliant job is showing all of the ways that we can commit intentionally to that body. But that's the success mark for me. It's commitment to the body.
And I think that's what's been particularly challenging in our church and other churches is any member of your community or fringe who has even an essence of consumerism or being a church consumer, we've noticed that's been amplified. So those who were already connected and convicted about what it means to be part of a church community, that's been amplified, which has been really positive, and they've gone above and beyond. But then on the other hand, equally so, those who have treated church as a product or service are probably doing that more than ever, and that's been tough. And I think we need to pray more and ask God for wisdom in how we just keep convicting people of how good and how important it is to be in a community.
Yeah, I think times of change are times of movement, aren't they? And so some people have moved in and become a lot more convicted. I think the people who are already on their way out, there'll be those people that we won't see again. And what we're all hoping is there's very few of them. One of the really hard things is we don't know who they are at the moment because it's hard to see them face to face. But I do expect that we'll have grown by people joining, and I think we will have lost people. And I don't think we'll be surprised about who those people are, because I think we'll go, oh, we could probably have seen that beforehand. And we're chasing them, but yeah.
I think one of the challenges, and maybe Scott will possibly this segues for us, but one of the challenges is that for the new people who are starting to engage with us, helping them to see the journey of faith as not simply kind of one of self-discovery or this is my own spiritual project where I'm getting in touch with, the God who made me, and kind of this hyper-spiritualism side of things, which when it really is just you engaging with a screen in your living room, it fosters that sense of it's just about me. And so the challenge I think we face as we seek to move people from the online experience into community, maybe that's virtual at the moment, hopefully it is fairly soon also physical, is helping them to see, yes, you're saved, but you're saved into a community of people that, as Greg was saying before, brings with it responsibilities, obligations to others, and trying to help people come on that journey, which is, back to the maturity question we talked about before.
So one of the things that, happened early on in terms of the sort of chatter and the Facebook feeds was, hey, there were hundreds and hundreds more people connecting, online, and Pastor Math, to use that sort of American, everyone was kind of going wild. Well, we've never had a bigger church service ever. And I think we've now over the last few weeks been able to understand those metrics a bit better. We've also seen that there's been a whole bunch of people engaging outside our local communities and outside our regional areas. And we've been able to actually ask the key question, well, actually, how do we see people become part of our church families, and how do we turn them on to meaningful views? So I'm wondering, can I get the truth? So I might talk to Amy first before going to Greg and Tim. Can I get the truth in terms of your online views, what you're seeing, so that people listening in can get a helpful way of understanding what's going on?
Yeah, sure. So just by way of how we're keeping an eye on that. So we're looking at devices that are connecting with us via 3 platforms. So our church online platform, and via Facebook, and via YouTube. So that's our 3, we gather those device connections. And also we have an online connection card. So every single week during the service, we take a quick break, encouraging people to fill out a connection card. And so we've been comparing, well, what's our device numbers versus our connection card numbers. Now, devices have always been higher, and we've kind of seen it pretty similar. Like, it kind of peaked at the beginning, peaked around Easter time, and it has been, we've noticed a gradual decline is probably an overstatement, but we certainly haven't seen growth over the last kind of month. Now, are people more comfortable gathering, and you've got lots of people watching on one device? That, there's all these anomalies with looking at devices, but that's just what you can work with. Yeah, connection cards, we've never had as many cards as we've had devices, and we're again seeing a decline in connection cards. So it's, do you provide an incentive for people to do it? The best we do is we just really say, this is our way of connecting. We just try to make it seem like a really warm, welcoming, normal thing. So often our MC or service leader will say, we get about 150 of these each week. Like, it's very normal to do a connection card. And, we prefer the connection card because it puts a name to the device, like a device. While it's awesome to go, cool, we had 300 devices, if we don't know who those people are, then that just really stops our ability to connect with them.
So, Amy, did you have a culture at Grace City pre-COVID of people filling out during the service connection cards, a welcoming team who followed the new person up and said, hey, we'd really like to connect?
That's yeah. So connection cards have always been a really normal part of in the life of Grace City. But I appreciate online, you're already on the screen. Do you pull out your phone? You do the digital card? Like, it's one extra step as opposed to having just a paper card and a pencil sitting on your chair ready for you. So we have seen a decline in not just the number of members, but also the number of first timers.
So what's been realistic then? How many connection cards have people been, how many would you have been seeing?
Yep. So a peak was 200. Most weeks we still see, so our lowest was 125.
This is in the online space. Yep.
This is our online connection card, which is accessible via any of our platforms.
And so how many devices are there?
Yep. So we'd be seeing at least 50 devices more than our connection cards, but our highest week of devices was close to 300. So our highest week of cards was 195. Our highest week of devices was 271. So
and how many of those 200?
Can I jump in on that? Just to clarify, when Amy is telling us about the devices, she is pulling out. We've already done some culling on what actual amount of devices we're counting. So there's plenty more devices that tune in for, 30 seconds or 6. What we're counting in those devices are devices that have actually engaged for the majority of the service. So otherwise it's probably up in like 3,000 or something, which is just ridiculous. So we just ignore all that.
But that's really helpful. But I'm hearing that it's quite a high number of people who are filling out Connect cards. You've had a culture of it. It'd be interesting to hear how many of those Connect cards are members, they're called Grace City Home, versus people who are connecting in for the first time and newcomers.
Yeah, so we've given the options on our card is I'm a member, I'm tuning in while my church is not kind of very active during COVID. I'm tuning in because I'm keen to connect with Grace City, so I'm interested in calling Grace City home, or I'm tuning in as someone who's exploring Christianity. So we kind of think there's the mission contact, there's the membership contact, there's the neighbor from another church, and then there's our members. We absolutely have the absolute majority is members filling out cards. We haven't had a first timer exploring Grace City as a church for a while. But then lots of our fringe people are still filling in cards, and we surprisingly get the person exploring Christianity filling in cards, whether it's their, couple of times along with us, which is cool. And a bunch of people just tuning in from other churches, which is always nice.
So that's helpful. You talk about the fringe person. I think that's one of the things potentially we've got the opportunity in this online space to have a larger fringe. But the fringe person you talked about there was someone who had already connected previously in with Grace City? Is that how you'd?
Yeah, I'd say most of our fringe or our regulars are people who came to our physical building at the start of the year or prior to that. Although we may be seeing just a handful, less than half a dozen, of people who've started tuning in and are being not anonymous about it.
So we've now been doing this for sort of a couple of months. How many people have filled in the Connect card and jumped in, if they're already a Christian, into the onboard course, which is your membership course, or jumped into your Explore course, which is your checking out Jesus and interested in following Jesus course?
Yep, so we've run 2 onboard courses online since COVID and seen about 15 people come through there. That's presented really exciting opportunities, because while most of them are people who genuinely are keen to connect with Grace City, we had these 2 German exchange students who were about to fly home, and they'd been visiting our physical building, and they were like, oh, we'd love to just come along. So great, they had no intention of staying in Australia, let alone connecting with Grace City. They have a church back home, but they wanted to be discipled. They wanted to hear what the church vision was about. So that was really cool. And then there's some others interstate who, wouldn't connect with our church in normal circumstances. We believe in the local church and the local church community, but, our online course provides a great place to disciple them. Explore, similarly, Matt Barco looks after mission in the life of Grace City. He's seen great numbers because it's just easier than ever to send someone a link, come along. The Explore course is a little bit shorter and maybe a little less intimidating for people. So he's seen great fruit from that as well.
Scotty, can I jump in there? My reflection, I'd be interested to hear on Greg on this, is that my sense is that so we've got 2 courses, Onboard and Explore. Onboard for the Christian wanting to become a member, Explore for the non-Christian wanting to explore Jesus. My sense is that while the initial high take-up for Onboard, Christians wanting to join our church, was there, those people were kind of already in our orbit pre-COVID and really were planning on joining us anyway. Whereas for Explore, the non-Christians, we've had more of them come out of the woodwork and just appear and be willing to take next steps. And as COVID has carried on, it feels like we're continuing to get the non-Christian engagement, but the pool of Christians seeking to proactively take next steps and let us know that they're engaging with us is diminishing. And so it doesn't mean they're not there, it just means that they're not identifying themselves and actively taking next steps, at least in our context. And I wonder, it's just a hunch, I wonder if that is because Christians and non-Christians do it slightly differently. The Christian, before they join a church, probably wants to come and, they want to step in the building, they want to feel what this thing is like. And they're probably thinking, it's maybe a month or 2 more before that's going to happen. So I'm going to hold off and not take that next step. Whereas the non-Christian will, church is new for them. They've engaged in the online way. Therefore, they're used to engaging like that. So they're happy to jump into a virtual Explore course, for example. So I don't know if that's similar to what you're seeing, Greg, or not, but that's what we're feeling.
I think your read on it is exactly right. So Christians have a mindset. They've got a pattern for what church is, which is physical gathering. Which means that while you had people flirting with new churches earlier in COVID, going a bit of a church tourism thing, as we move towards the end of it, people are now thinking, I want to get back into my physical church, which means new people joining. It's the new people who've moved to that part of Sydney or to move to Newcastle. So I think that makes sense of the numbers dropping off. For the non-Christian, they're not thinking about joining a church, they're thinking about joining Christianity. And so it makes sense that they're happy to do that online. So I think I've managed to get some stats. We've run 2 membership courses and about somewhere between 40 and 50 people have joined. And the sense is maybe half of those, a little more than half, had some relationship with us beforehand. But all of the others were moving into the area because it was the beginning of the year, remember, at the beginning of COVID. And so we were mopping up the people who'd moved into the area. We've run a bunch of evangelistic events that have had lots of people. And for us, our life course is kept a little tighter. And I think we've had about 35 people sort of go through that from beginning to end. And 6 people have become Christians, which is more than we would have had at this point during this period last year. Not much more, but certainly I wouldn't say evangelism has taken a hit.
So have you...
That's awesome, by the way. 6 people becoming Christians. Sorry, that just went unsaid. That's awesome.
It is amazing. It's those things get dropped into staff meeting and everyone goes, oh yeah. And you go, hang on a minute. My daughter nailed it last night. I was saying to them, and she's 13, and she went, 6 parties in heaven. And whereas none of the staff said that. So I'm going to sack the staff and employ my daughter.
So that is great news. What's caused it? I mean, people are listening in thinking, okay, how did you actually convert those views into meaningful, follow-up? So what are some of the things that you've been intentionally doing? What are some of the things that you've gone, that hasn't been working, so we've tried this and this seems to have worked? Greg?
Okay. I think these guys are going to talk about program in a minute. And I think we actually have quite a similar pathway. In my mind, it always starts with vision first. So giving the church a really clear vision for what's going on, a sense of conviction. And then it moves to people who drive it, who really champion it. And so we set up a Go team early on who really were about getting church on mission. They were championing it, running lots of events, making a lot of noise. And in all of our community groups, there has been a Go rep, which in the community group has been really championing it, getting people praying for their non-Christian friends so that when we hit the pathway, which I think is pretty much exactly the same as Grace Cities, the pathway wasn't just sitting there, it was actually fertile with the conviction and the champions happening around it. I'll let these guys talk about the pathway because I suspect theirs is, like I say, it's as good as it's going to get.
Thank you, Greg.
Before we jump in, that's really helpful. So you've talked about the importance of a vision for making disciples, a vision for mission, that creating that mission heat. There's a great opportunity for church leaders to be doing that now. But if you haven't been doing that already as part of your church, start doing, creating that and carving that vision out. Yeah. You've moved it down into a convictional level in the community groups and how do people praying for the non-Christian and championing that. It's important to have, like all things, have someone actually responsible for, promoting that and encouraging people to be thinking about it. But then helpfully now we need an integration pathway. We actually need someone to move through the church and have those little next steps. So what do the next steps look like in the online world, Amy?
Yeah. In many ways similar, in many ways different. So, in normal life, a Grace City would have a newcomer come along. We'd connect with them either via card or someone would get their details. We'd follow them up with an email, try to then follow them up again more personally, and hope that they take steps and encourage them towards taking next steps, whether that's towards a course like Explore or On Board. We have found, as I mentioned before, that we are getting less engagement from the first timer. So I haven't had a first timer connection card for quite a while, quite a number of weeks, which, makes me a bit nervous and sad and stressed. So if you're feeling that way at your church, then me too. It's an interesting season where perhaps we just need to put all the equipment, all the everything someone needs in their court so that they can take next steps when they're comfortable. Tim and I have chatted and he's mentioned that it's just COVID is such a strange time. We haven't lived through this before. And so maybe it is just weirder than ever to hand your details over. Maybe on the online platform, you send your email out, are you concerned you'll get junk mail every day for the next 6 months? So there's maybe just a few extra limitations on people. So what can we do in our services is we can just keep encouraging it, keep having that culture of doing so. When we do, for what it's worth saying, when we do get newcomers connecting with us, we tried calling people. We've not done that in the life of Grace City before. I wouldn't say it went fantastically well. My thinking was, people are so disconnected at the moment. We're all online. You don't want another email. I'll call you. That didn't go so well. So we didn't do that again. But that's okay. We've tried for more personal emails, so not just like a generic email response, but hello there, etc. Quite personal. And we've had a virtual cafe space after the church, which, has had some positives, lots of negatives. People are screen tired. it might seem a bit weird for many, and other churches have had different experiences, but yeah.
So you've tried the, if you're a newcomer here, we've got a specific Zoom room set up for you. You've got your best mission people in there. You've tried to make it, have at least amount of weird Christians in there.
We've tried to basically completely replicate our physical Sunday cafe experience. So we've not made it just exclusively for newcomers. We've said, after church, this is what Grace City Community does. We gather, and now we're doing it virtually, and we've acknowledged it's not as good, but it's what we can do. And we've had, a small amount of uptake from members and the usual suspects, people who just love community and hanging out. We've had a number of members who've kind of come in a little bit and then come out a little bit. Heaps of members have not partaken in that. We haven't seen many newcomers, a handful of fringe people, I think 2 first-timers.
So, I mean, in some way, I'm encouraged. I guess I'm encouraged by that and discouraged by that. So I'm encouraged to say it's hard work, and I think we want to set nice, reasonable expectations for the average church and the average pastor. You guys have from the start had an online connect card. You've had a really good online presence in your gatherings. You've done the right things by upfront saying, hey, next steps, if you're already a Christian, we've got an onboard course. Next steps, if you're not a Christian, we've got an explore course. You put that up front and during the service and had lots of calls to actions. Your Facebook and live stream, you even had nice, clear links. Yeah. So in all those things you're doing, I guess good practice. But you still haven't.
Still not working.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, that's good. That's great, and it's still not working. So I want to push
more questions and answers, Scott.
Yeah, that's
we've tried a bunch of stuff and it hasn't worked, or at least it hasn't worked very well. And so, yeah.
So I think that's great though. You've tried stuff, it hasn't worked, but you've tweaked it. You haven't just done the same thing. So I just got off the phone earlier with a pastor. They found they had no one filling out their Connect cards over the first few weeks. They tweaked a couple of things. They moved the announcement up in the front of the service. They put links in their screen. They've gone from, one person to they had 15 people last week. Now, I wanted to encourage them to say, generally it takes sort of 3 weeks for the average person just coming to church to actually put in their details and sign things out. I wonder if it's a longer adjustment. 3 weeks is now 6 weeks. So I wonder if it just takes that little bit longer for people to go, oh, I'm comfortable to actually give over those details. I want to, one of the things you've done, Greg, I noticed is you've had a midweek next step as well. You've had a theological discussion or an apologetics type discussion that isn't church, but is itching where people are at. I think early on we thought, oh, this is going to be, great fertile soil for people who are just, over the secular world or, wanting to find, spiritual answers to their questions. But in some ways we've been, thankfully by the grace of God, kept away from a lot of the significant impacts that we're seeing in other parts of the world. So how has the midweek next step been helpful probably to increase your numbers?
Well, this is something that we discovered by accident. And it came, one of our staff just had this realization. He said, evangelicals, we're content providers. We're really good at content. Most people who've been in full-time ministry have led hundreds of Bible studies and written, scores and scores of sermons, which means that it's actually not that hard to get a discussion that's reasonably intelligent going about most Christian topics. If you're a church that's been low on content and high on a Sunday experience, you're going to be really struggling during this time because you can't do the big Sunday experience. And so we started talking around, well, what can we do without heaps of effort? And we realized a table, 2 microphones, people sitting head to head, having a real conversation about a meaningful topic. And so we've done things like, we've done very theological topics, 2 nights on the Trinity. We did the resurrection. We've also done things like suffering. Tonight we've got an indoor plant night. There's all sorts. We've moved from the really kind of shallow conversational end to really quite meaningful stuff. And I think we'll keep doing it. There's something about 2 people sitting around a table just having a chat. And it's kind of lit well and all that sort of stuff. They've both got coffees and it has worked really well. And the number of people joining in, what we've noticed is there might be, 300-400 views on the night, but in the next 48 hours, that bumps up into the thousands, several thousand. Because I think what Christians do is they go, I'll just watch this, and if it's all right, I'll share it. And that's really been happening. I think we'll keep doing that after COVID, probably once a month.
So what have you...
Where can we get access to that, Greg? That sounds great. How can we find that?
I think it's just on our YouTube channel.
Cool.
Yeah. If I really knew what I was doing, I'd be able to draw that off the top of my head. I think it's just on our YouTube channel. And it's it's so lo-fi. It's so simple. I did one on the resurrection and I did one on suffering. Half an hour's prep, just going back, looking through a couple of old talks, looking at the outline. Okay, there's my categories of thought. As long as the two people have good chemistry, I think we can, this is something that is, before COVID, we'd think, oh man, we've got to set everything up and who's going to film it? Now we can do those things in the space of half an hour. Tonight's the plant night. Sometime soon, I'm just going to sit down with our executive pastor and we're going to talk about money. We're going to talk about building. We're going to talk about mental health. We're just going to range. And it seems as if the less directed and business-like it is, and the more conversational it is, the more people really like it. We've done them as live events, so people can actually write in. And some of them have been very overtly evangelistic. So the suffering one, we were engaging with non-Christians as they were asking people we didn't know who they were. And so that's kind of really helped that it's been live. Yeah.
So we talk often about working with the insider, so working with the church member in terms of seeing their confidence and their conviction and their competency grow in, mission and invitation. Where do you think people's confidence is at the moment? Do you think there's been a greater boldness to, share the invite to church, to provide a link to this midweek thing?
I've been thinking about this. I'd be interested to see what you guys have. I think there's a graph going two ways, that way and that way. People's confidence in what we're doing is going up because we're getting our act together. Whereas in their first couple of weeks, I think they're like, oh, do I invite my friends along? This could be the lamest thing in the world. So their confidence in what we're doing is going up. But
so the confidence in the gospel delivery systems, we'll call it that. That's the technical term that we use. Their confidence that online church is going to be okay. It's not going to cut out. Greg's not going to be too weird. That's been going up. Onboard's been, or Life and membership course Connect has been working well.
What's going down though is, I think as COVID goes on, people's relationships in general are not deepening because we've been built with bodies. And so I think as people in general in our community move through COVID, there is this gradual, almost imperceptible move towards individualism, and we're in our homes. That ad, we're all in this together, we're not. And so while I think their confidence in our gospel delivery system might be increasing, the sense of connectedness that people have to invite a friend along, in theory is there, but in practice, those relationships are being a bit neglected because we're just not seeing each other. That's my hunch. These guys might be different.
We kind of had responses on both ends of the spectrum. So when COVID kicked off, we used community groups as a platform for evangelism training. So we watched Dave Jensen's series and then did a few weeks of Alpha to just equip the members of our church to know, hey, how do I have effective gospel conversations? And some people responded to that really well and felt like, this is exactly what I need. The people in my life during COVID are asking big questions. And so being equipped this way is really helpful. On the other hand, we also had many members in our community who are just like, I'm exhausted. Get me away from a screen. I'm not talking to anyone, let alone anyone evangelistically. And I don't have the capacity to do so because I've lost my job or, gone through something really difficult myself. So we've had both ends there. And then I think we're probably seeing a little bit of shift in people on that spectrum as time goes on. I've been, chatting and hearing about how people are going in community. What I've noticed as well is people's friendship circles are definitely shrinking. So you really work out who are the people that I can't get through a week without talking to, and I'm okay to text them or Zoom them, even though I'm screen fatigued. But then that circle shrinks radically. It's a lot harder to have the 25 people that I just occasionally touch base with. People don't have the capacity or the time for those relationships at the moment, or the screen effort, I should say. So you kind of, some of the things I've been hearing is I've really worked out who my really close friends are. So perhaps some of those relationships are deepening, and perhaps as restrictions are lifting, they'll be the groups that gather together to watch church, gather together to do something, or even watch something like HBC's thing. Let's all bring a friend along and watch it in our lounge room, rather than tune in just online. So I think that's what we'll see, but it's having that broader neighborly, brotherly, sisterly Christian community stretch that I think will be an interesting thing to rebuild.
So thinking into your community groups, they are, I guess, one of the things that this has sort of forced on us is to think simple church, in the sense of what are the structures that we actually, need to see people mature and be discipled and be grown in their Christian faith. And community groups or small groups have been one of those places. What does it look like, or have you each tried to bring the not yet Christian into your community group? So, pre-COVID, the pathway would have been really clear. You would have moved them into an explore course or a life course, keep them away from community groups as much as possible. Give them the opportunity to explore Christianity without Christians messing it up, so to speak. But, has there been an opportunity? Have you seen your community groups or your small groups been inviting the outsider in?
We haven't, Scott. We've continued to do what we used to do, though I know that, Greg, you guys have. So I would love to hear. I'm fascinated to know if we should have done it, how's it gone, all of those sorts of things. So, Greg, so ours, it's exactly what it was, but just moved online. But I'm keen to hear from Greg.
Ours has been an utter disaster. No. From chatting with the guys involved, what we've discovered is that having non-Christians join our community groups has not been a particularly evangelistic thing. They haven't joined that in order to be evangelized, but they have joined it for relationships. And so, for instance, we've encouraged our growth groups and community groups to be watching church online together. So they're part of a Zoom room and they're watching church on YouTube. And people have invited their friends to do that with them so that they'll stick around in the Zoom chat afterwards. But I don't think that experience has been super evangelistic. I think it's still been the same pathway that you've talked about, which is we encourage them to join life as quickly as possible. But it's just been a slightly easier relational experience into church there.
So just clarifying, what you've done is, rather than invite them into the small group midweek, let's get into the word, let's pray for each other, let's do life together. You've invited community groups, or encouraged community groups to be inviting not yet Christians to their Zoom watch parties, I suppose, for want of a better word.
Yeah, you may be exposing the shallowness of my understanding of my own church, but I think that is it.
So Tim, is that something you do at Grace City?
Is it something we would do, did you say, or is it something we do?
Yeah, is it something you would do? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, now that you've mentioned it, I'm intrigued by it. The challenge is the way that is partly the demographics. So I was going to follow up to Greg with, tell me, how does that work with parents with young kids? So as a parent of a young kid, personally, 2 young kids, Sunday mornings they're very, very difficult. So we run 2 services. I'm on creche at one of our services, trying to look after the 2 kids so that my wife can actually engage with the service. So the thought of being on a Zoom call with my community group watching just wouldn't work. And that's certainly not all of our church, but it's a pretty solid number. I don't know if it's 30%, 40%, maybe not even that high. But so there's the challenge of that. As restrictions, early on, I suspect, like many, we encourage groups physically to gather and watch the service. That was kind of stripped away from us. And so the next encouragement was, watch it on your own, but then after the service, Zoom or call into your community group and build the habit of prayer and fellowship after the group. Then we brought in the whole church. We use a platform called Remo rather than Zoom, but the after church community in the cafe thing, which is potentially in tension with the community group getting together. So possibly we shot ourselves in the foot with that, but what we were trying to do was create a space for the person who's not in the group. And so, Greg, what you're identifying there is that actually people can invite someone in. I guess the weakness or the strength of that is that it builds on relationship. The weakness is that there's still, maybe you've got another, on-ramp for these people, but it doesn't address the person who is not already connected to someone.
And my conviction is, in ministry, we're often looking for what is the absolute silver bullet idea, but it's usually the idea that's executed best, that goes best. And so whether it's the overall REMA room for everyone at the end of the meeting or the smaller watch parties and so on, I suspect the key difference is not in the quality of each idea, but in how well they're executed. There probably isn't that great a difference in the quality of the idea.
And I wonder, Greg, with what you've done, I wonder if a key part of it is actually giving some of the responsibility to someone already in that small group to actually be responsible for championing mission and championing that invitation, not loading up your small group leader who often might not have that mission kind of zeal. They might be a great carer. They might be a great teacher. And they might be a very mature Christian, but actually, training up and encouraging someone in the group to be that sort of adjutant for, hey, who are we inviting this week, and who are we praying for, and let's get this happen. So I wonder if that's a key aspect. You've actually just upped your mission just that little bit more, and decentralized also the sort of the mission agitation that happened at the gathering level to a whole bunch of people, rather than the 10% of our church who I reckon are big E evangelists.
Yeah. As I think about it, it's done that. So our groups have essentially 4 representatives now. There's the growth group leader. There's the person who's the go rep, all about evangelism. The person who is kind of the community relationship rep. And then there is the person who is looking after the ones who have special needs. And having those different groups, I think, definitely helps. For us, as I think about it, I think one of the reasons why having the separate watch parties might help is because we have 3 different campuses. That will help people to join the campus that they've been watching with after this. Whereas if we have something centralized, there may be a difficulty there. That's the problem of us not having a building, is we're separated over different campuses. So we may be forced to do that one.
I wonder if demographics play a part of it. You've got a younger you both got younger demographics. What about your ethnic diversity, Tim? I don't know if the impact of all this, what's been the challenge for some of your non-English speaking background groups that are coming and connecting to your church?
Yeah, I don't want to overstate too much here. I don't know that it's made a major difference. Maybe I'm not seeing things. Probably the one obvious difference that I've noticed is that Zoom is difficult to communicate anyway. When you add to that volatile internet connections and sometimes a microphone that's not really working, when you add to all of that, English is a second language, communication can get very difficult. And so aside from that, my own experience is it hasn't been, the fact that we are fairly ethnically diverse hasn't really been much of an issue for us.
Well, I'm really thankful for your honesty. I'm hoping that's encouraging for our listeners to hear that, even guys who are, even a church like Grace City is kind of doing everything right, is still struggling. So I'm hoping that's an encouragement. So Tim and Amy, I really appreciate your honesty. And I appreciate as well your generosity. It's been great seeing a lot of those resources and a lot of those conversations come out from Grace City as well. So thanks for joining us on this podcast. And I just want to finish with this question, maybe to Tim and Greg. What are you looking forward to most for your church family at the end of this season?
For me, I'll jump in and give Tim time to think. For me, it's as we move back towards the chance for our church to have shaken up all of the normal limitations that we can see. So up until this, we thought we lived in a fairly anti-Christian society, blah, 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 blah. This has kind of shaken all the bits and pieces on the table, which means that we can now give people a really biblical vision for when we go back to meet. And so I'm hoping when we go back, evangelism will be through the roof because we're pushing it now, a sense of kingdom sacrifice. Life has been disrupted, and that's a gospel opportunity.
Scott, I reckon it maybe answers your question, maybe it doesn't. I think sometimes you don't know what you've lost until it's gone. I think the Sunday gathering, the physical Sunday gathering, is probably one of those things. I always valued it, but just not being able to do it, I miss seeing people, and I really want to get back to seeing them. I feel like it's the pastor's heart. I want to see people, and I think not doing that kind of makes me sad. I think it's what we were designed for. It's what Christian community is supposed to be, communities of love. And so, it's very hard to do that online. And so I think hopefully having it taken away for a while helps us appreciate it more. And when we can gather again, actually, we're even more inclined to give it our all to seek to love and care for one another. So I hope we come out of this a more loving and caring community. And with a greater appreciation of the gathering.
Amy, can I finish with you? How can you encourage membership pastors who are, struggling with? There's only there's only got a few people to follow up.
Yeah, totally. Well, I think off the back of what Tim's just said, I think our hope and prayer is that this season has demonstrated what it's like to be robbed of, the true essence of membership and gathering in community. But I think in terms of following up and connecting with people, I think I'm just holding out and hoping that, this is the internet. There are millions and billions of people on there. I have no doubt there are people connecting, and, under God's grace and his sovereignty, we will keep just keep doing everything you can to be the church with the very warm, open, welcoming virtual doors that you can, and be ready to hit the ground running when we can open our physical doors once again.
Great. And I think that's it's going to be a lot of celebration, a lot of big parties, and we're all looking forward to relaunch, to restart, and hopefully that'll be coming in the next 3 to 6 months. Well, thanks for spending time with us. Look forward to chatting soon.
Thanks, guys.